Hello investors, and welcome to Cruise Asset Management's Chart of the Day. And today we're going to talk about something that's not exactly financial, but that affects the markets and have been affecting the markets for quite some time, but that I haven't commented on it for a little bit, and that's the coronavirus. That's because I came across a chart in the Economist that I thought was fascinating. So here I'm going to remind you right now, we have, from our friends at White Charts, we have a chart of the coronavirus. We topped over 6 million cases not too long ago, 177,000 deaths. And I'm going to put up the death rate has been coming down just under 3%. The mortality rate, that's the mortality rate of people who have been hospitalized. There's an estimate about 1 in 10 are not hospitalized. So that means the mortality rate is actually 0.3%. And if I look at the coronavirus cases per day, they're clearly coming down from a high that was between 77,000 and 56,000, so about 65,000 cases a day, to more like 35,000 cases a day. So that's about cut in half. And if we look at the coronavirus deaths per day, again, when you look at cases versus deaths, the deaths are a fraction of the cases, right? So 0.3%, and so we're looking at 1,000 deaths per day. Now 1,000 is a lot, but when I look at the heart disease numbers, heart and disease stroke statistics from 2020 update, it says right here, the U.S. there are 2,300 deaths from from heart disease every day. And there's about 400 deaths from strokes every day. So that's 3,000 deaths between heart disease and strokes every day that we are more or less as a population used to. And right now we are getting 1,000 from coronavirus. So I find it somewhat ironic that we aren't focused very much on these 3,000 deaths, but we are changing the globe off of these 1,000 deaths a day. So, but what I found even more fascinating, and I alluded to this earlier, was this chart from The Economist. So here's from The Economist. This was a survey done from the perspective of people by age group and how deadly they thought the coronavirus was relative to their age group. And so if you look at the 18 to 29-year-olds, whether they were worried about contracting COVID, they were very or somewhat worried. They were more than 60% worried, while the over 65 age group was more like 50% worried, and even less very worried. And when you took a poll and said actual versus guessed percentage of shares of death, from the 18 to 24-year-old perspective, they kind of guessed that the range was, I'll call that, looks like just under 10%. And they guessed that 65 and over was just under 40%, when the reality was quite different. The reality is of the deaths that actually happen, about 80% of them are comprised of 65% and over. And of the 18 and 24-year-olds, almost none. And from 35 to 34, just 1% or so. And even as you get up there, you don't actually even get to a reasonable number until you get over 65. So people are consistently overestimating the risk of coronavirus. And so I'm going to take this to a chart that I have created. These numbers were by, let's see, I'm going to bring this up. Excuse me while I get this data up. Here we go. So this is from the CDC. Here's a chart of all ages, of age group, all deaths involving COVID, and deaths from all causes. So these are all causes and coronavirus causes. And so I'm going to put up a chart here. It says odds by, we're going to look at this chart first. So deaths by 100,000 by age group. So for every 100,000 people by age group, 1 to 4 years old, literally 1 in a million. 5 to 14, 1 in a million. 15 to 24, 7 in a million. So if you're really looking, you start to get to 3 out of 100,000 people have died in the 25 to 34 age group. And it's not until you get up to 65 to 74 where you get 100 out of 100,000 have died from coronavirus. Now, if I look at this relative to what your odds are of dying in general, you have, this is the easiest chart to look at. Basically, of the people who have died from anything, if you're 85 years and older, you basically had a 7.6% or 7.7% chance of passing away if you were 85 years and older, or have 7.7% of the population has died from something non-coronavirus in 2020 if you're 85 and older, but less than 1% have died from coronavirus. So then again, if you're 75 to 84, 2.6% of the people in that age group have died in 2020 from non-coronavirus related issues, and less than 0.3% of that age group have died from coronavirus. So again, I am 54 years old. If I look at this number, about 0.5% of 55-year-olds to 64-year-olds have died. So out of 10,000 people, that's about 50 people have died from something non-coronavirus related, where coronavirus has killed 5. So you've got about a 10 times more likely chance of dying from something non-coronavirus than coronavirus. And if I bring up the data that I did for some of these younger groups, because you can't really see the data, they're basically flat, it's a rounding error. So if I look at this, this is odds of dying from COVID right here. If you're under 1, it's 565 times more likely that you will die from something non-coronavirus than from the coronavirus. 1 to 4, 140 times more likely something else will kill a 1 to 4-year-old. Again, 100 times more likely from 5 to 14, 64 times more likely. It's not until you get into my age group, my age bracket, 45 to 50, where it starts to level off at about 10x. So if you're concerned about your kids, I get it. I have 4 children, and I'm concerned about my kids. But if your concern about your kids is more than 1/100th of what you're concerned about the rest of the world, is maybe you're putting your worries somewhere else that are slightly misplaced. And even for yourself, if I am more than 10 times or 1/10 of the time worried about the coronavirus killing me versus something else killing me, then maybe my worries are a little bit misplaced. And so as we move along in the economy, and as these numbers continue to go through, here are some numbers by states. So California coronavirus cases by day. As you can see, these cases are leveling off and going down. So 4,000 cases by a day, 4,200. Down here, this is in blue. You've got New Jersey, 330 cases by day. And then here are numbers of deaths by day. So here we got in New York, 3 to 5 cases. And now this includes the big spike. So let's just go for the last 3 months. We can see how these numbers are really relatively small in a lot of states. Illinois, 27, Texas, 21, Arizona, 21, New York, 5. So these numbers are getting to be pretty small relative to some of our other risks that we have out there. And so if we're looking for a vaccination to save the economy, I don't think we really need this to be saved. There studies are suggesting that less than half the people are going to get the vaccination, and then less than half of those people that receive the vaccination, it will be effective on. But at the end of the day, the coronavirus might be scary, but it's not as dangerous as the rest of the world. And so if we're fearing the coronavirus more than the rest of the world, or even equally as the rest of the world, or more than 1/10 of the rest of the world, then maybe we're have some fears, or the danger is a little bit misplaced. You might want to take a look at my TEDx talk. I'm going to put in this because I talked about this literally a year ago before the coronavirus hit, about how people don't understand some of the risks that they take in everyday life, and they make non-data adjusted decisions in their life, and that perhaps maybe understanding the data better would enable them to make better decisions. So this is Stuart Cruz with the coronavirus update and your chart of the day.